My name is Harper Mitchell, am 30 years old, and am standing in the freezing snow on Christmas Eve with my 78-year-old grandfather, watching my father slam his mansion door in our faces. Our suitcases sit at our feet, already dusting with fresh powder, and Grandpa is shivering so hard I can hear his teeth chattering. My father just screamed that we're worthless leeches who don't deserve to breathe his air. 2 years ago, he remarried a woman named Patricia, dripping in diamonds and cruelty, and everything changed overnight. Now, as the temperature drops and my grandfather's lips turn blue, one question burns in my frozen mind. How did the magic of Christmas turn into this absolute nightmare? Before we dive into this story, I need to know something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments because I love knowing where my stories travel. And if you're already feeling that tension building, go ahead and smash that like button. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. This story has more twists than a mountain road, and you won't want to miss a single second. Now, let me take you back to how this disaster actually started. That morning had started with hope, the kind of fragile hope you cradle carefully because you know it might shatter. I woke up at 5 in the morning in my cramped studio apartment, the kind of place where you can touch the kitchen counter from your bed. I worked 2 jobs, waiting tables at a diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then pulling retail shifts at a department store from 3 until closing. Every paycheck disappeared into rent, utilities, groceries, and Grandpa's medications. For the past 6 months, had been living with me after a bad fall that revealed his advancing dementia. He needed constant supervision, someone to remind him to take his pills, someone to make sure he didn't wander outside and get lost. I became that someone because nobody else would step up, but it'd been saving for months, tucking away $5 here, $10 there, all so I could buy real Christmas gifts for my family. Nothing expensive, but thoughtful. I spent 3 weekends making a photo album for my father, filled with pictures from my childhood, back when he used to smile at me. I knitted a scarf in his favorite color, navy blue, working on it during my lunch breaks until my fingers cramped. My father had remarried Patricia 2 years earlier, and the change was immediate and brutal. Before her, Dad lived modestly in a 2-bedroom house, drove a sensible sedan, and called me twice a week. After Patricia, he moved into a marble mansion in the wealthiest neighborhood in town, started driving a Mercedes, and our phone calls dropped to maybe once every 2 months. Patricia brought 2 adult children into the marriage. Stephanie, 26, who worked as a social media influencer and never met a mirror she didn't photograph, and Brandon, 24, a lawyer at some prestigious firm where he bragged about his billable hours. Since the wedding, my father became a stranger. He stopped asking about my life, stopped visiting Grandpa, stopped being the man who raised me. But 3 weeks before Christmas, he called out of nowhere and insisted we come for Christmas dinner. His voice sounded strange, tight, like he was reading from a script, but I convinced myself it meant something good. Maybe he missed us. Maybe Patricia had softened. Maybe we could be a family again. Grandpa was so excited that morning. He kept forgetting where we were going, his memory slipping in and out like a bad radio signal. But he knew it was Christmas, and he knew we were seeing his son. He put on his best suit, the one he wore to my high school graduation, now a bit loose because Head lost weight. I helped him with his tie 3 times because he kept forgetting how. We loaded our modest gifts into my beat-up Honda, the car that groaned every time I turned the key and sometimes refused to start in cold weather. I whispered a prayer to whatever patron saint watches over struggling single women and their elderly dependents, and mercifully, the engine turned over. The drive to Dad's new neighborhood took 40 minutes, and with every mile, the houses got bigger and the gates got taller. When we pulled up to his address, I actually checked it twice because surely this couldn't be right. The mansion looked like something from a movie, all white columns and enormous windows, a circular driveway with a fountain in the center that somehow wasn't frozen despite the December cold. Patricia answered the door before we even knocked, as if she'd been watching through the window. She wore a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, and her smile was the kind that never reaches the eyes. She looked at our coats, department store brands bought on clearance, and her nose wrinkled just slightly. "Welcome," she said in a voice like honey poured over ice. "Do come in. Please remove your shoes at the door. The floors were just polished." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. "Your presence might dirty what I've built." Stephanie appeared behind her mother, phone in hand, already recording us for some social media story. She was wearing head-to-toe designer labels, her engagement ring so large it looked like it might topple her hand forward. "Oh my God," she announced loudly enough for everyone in the foyer to hear. "Are those your gifts? Did you wrap them yourself?" Her laugh was sharp and cruel. Brandon emerged from somewhere deeper in the house, cocktail in hand despite it being 2 in the afternoon, and when he saw Grandpa, he smirked. "Hey, it's the old crazy man. Does he even know where he is?" My grandfather's face crumpled with confusion and hurt, and I squeezed his hand tighter. My father stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at us like a king surveying peasants. Head gained weight, wore an expensive suit, had a Rolex catching the light from the chandelier overhead. "Hey," he said flatly. "Glad you could make it." No hug, no warmth, just those empty words. I tried to smile, tried to pretend this was normal. "Merry Christmas, Dad. We're so happy to be here." Patricia ushered us toward the formal living room, a space so white and pristine it felt like walking into a museum exhibit labeled, "Do Not Touch." Grandpa kept asking where we were, his dementia making everything strange and frightening. I explained quietly over and over. "We're at your son's house, Grandpa. It's Christmas. We're having dinner." But even I wasn't sure I believed my own reassurances. The mansion felt cold despite the roaring fireplace, sterile despite the expensive decorations. This wasn't a home. It was a showcase, and we were already failing the inspection. Dinner was served in a dining room with a table so long you could have hosted a medieval banquet. A private chef had prepared everything. Honey-glazed ham, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables arranged like art, desserts displayed on crystal stands. Patricia had spared no expense, and she made sure we knew it. She dominated the conversation from the moment we sat down, discussing the Italian marble in the foyer, the custom draperies from France, the interior designer who'd flown in from New York. Stephanie sat beside her, chiming in with stories about her engagement to some tech entrepreneur who'd just sold his startup for millions. My father beamed at her, actually beamed, his face lit up with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You deserve the best." Brandon talked about his promotion at the law firm, how Head just closed a major case, how the senior partners were already discussing making him partner before he turned 30. My father clapped him on the shoulder like they were old friends. "I'm so proud of you, son." I tried to join the conversation, tried to share something from my own life. "Actually, I got Employee of the Month at the diner last week. It came with a $50 bonus, and they put my picture up on the wall." Patricia's eyes slid toward me like I'd just announced. I'd found a nickel on the sidewalk. "That's nice, dear," she said in a tone that made it clear it was anything but nice. "Brandon, tell us more about your bonus structure." Just like that, I was erased. Grandpa tried to tell a story, one of his favorites, about when Dad was 7 and they went fishing and Dad fell in the creek trying to catch a frog. It was a sweet memory, one I'd heard dozens of times, about a simpler time when my father was happy and kind. But before Grandpa could even get halfway through, Dad cut him off sharply. "Dad, please, nobody wants to hear ancient history. Let's stay in the present," Patricia stage whispered to Stephanie, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Does he even remember where he is? Poor thing." Stephanie giggled, and I felt rage building in my chest like a storm gathering strength. Then came the gift exchange, and I knew immediately we were in trouble. Patricia orchestrated it like a game show host, pointing to wrapped boxes stacked beneath a designer Christmas tree that must be cost thousands just to decorate. Stephanie went first, unwrapping diamond earrings that she squealed over like a teenager. 2 carats each, Patricia announced proudly. From Tiffany. Brandon opened his gift next, a Rolex watch, rose gold, with his initials engraved on the back. "Dad, this is incredible," he breathed, already strapping it onto his wrist. Patricia received a designer handbag, the kind I'd seen in magazines with price tags that made my stomach hurt. She kissed my father on the cheek, called him generous, and I wondered where all this money came from. Dad had been a mid-level manager at an insurance company. How did he afford this lifestyle? When it was my turn, I handed out my humble gifts with shaking hands. The photo album for Dad, full of memories I'd carefully curated and captioned. The scarf I'd knitted, soft yarn in his favorite color. Stephanie opened hers, a handmade bookmark with her initial painted on it, and burst out laughing. "You made these? How quaint. Like arts and crafts from summer camp." Patricia examined her gift, a small framed photo of Dad and me from when I was 10, and set it aside without comment. "Well, it's the thought that counts, I suppose." My father barely glanced at the album, muttered thanks, and placed it on the side table like it was junk mail. Grandpa's gift to his son was the most precious thing he owned, a vintage pocket watch that had belonged to his own father, passed down through generations. "This was for you," Dad said quietly, his hands trembling as he held it out. "I want you to have it now." My father took it awkwardly, didn't even open the case to look at it, just set it beside the photo album. "Thanks, Dad. That's thoughtful." Then Patricia dropped the bomb. "We didn't prepare anything for you two. We assumed grown adults wouldn't need gifts. After all, Christmas is really for children, isn't it?" The statement hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Stephanie and Brandon exchanged smirks. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, to defend us, to show some shred of the man I remembered. But he just stared at his plate, jaw tight, saying nothing. Later, after dessert, I walked past the side table and saw that Grandpa's precious watch had been pushed aside, nearly falling off the edge, like it was garbage. That's when I knew. We weren't family to these people. We were an inconvenience they were tolerating, and barely. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room for coffee and more bragging. Grandpa needed the bathroom, so I helped him navigate through the mansion's confusing maze of hallways. His dementia made everything harder. He kept thinking we were in his old house, asking where the bathroom was supposed to be. I guided him carefully, patiently, the way I did every day. But when he came out, he got disoriented, turned the wrong direction, and wandered into a room with double doors slightly ajar. I hurried after him, calling his name, but Head already stepped inside. It was clearly Patricia's personal space, a room that screamed wealth and ego. Glass display cases filled with expensive figurines, walls covered in photos of her posing with celebrities I vaguely recognized, awards and plaques proclaiming her importance. Grandpa, thinking he was somewhere familiar, reached out to steady himself against a table and accidentally brushed against a porcelain figurine, some delicate thing shaped like a dancer. It teetered, tumbled, and shattered against the marble floor in what felt like slow motion. The scream that followed could have shattered glass. Patricia came running, Stephanie and Brandon right behind her, and when she saw the broken pieces, her face went purple with rage. "That was $15,000. $15,000. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I rushed forward, hands up in apology. "I'm so sorry, Patricia. It was an accident. He didn't mean to. He has dementia. He gets confused. He'll pay for it, I promise." Even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were absurd. I had $47 in my checking account. Patricia knew it too. Her laugh was vicious. "Pay for it? With what money? Your pittance from slinging hash at that disgusting diner?" Stephanie joined in, arms crossed. "This is exactly why poor people shouldn't be allowed in nice homes. They don't know how to behave." I looked at my father, desperate. "Dad, please. He didn't mean to. He needs understanding, not anger." My father finally spoke, but the words cut deeper than Patricia's insults. "Dad, you need to be more careful." That's all he said. Not a defense, not compassion, just blame. Brandon circled us like a predator. "Then maybe he shouldn't be out in public if he can't control himself." Grandpa started crying, these horrible confused sobs, his hands shaking, his face crumpling. He didn't understand why everyone was angry. Didn't remember breaking anything. Couldn't comprehend the hostility pouring over him. I pulled him close, wrapping my arms around his frail shoulders, fury rising in my chest like lava. Hez confused and scared. "You're all being cruel." But it was about to get so much worse. Patricia's eyes narrowed, calculating. and she suddenly gasped dramatically. Oh no. Oh no. This can't be happening. She looked at Stephanie. My diamond bracelet. The one I left on my dresser this morning. It's gone. Every face in the room turned toward me and Grandpa. I felt my blood go cold. What are you saying? Patricia pressed a hand to her chest like a bad actress. I'm not accusing anyone, but you two were alone upstairs. And now it's missing. The implication was clear. Ugly. Designed to destroy. Stephanie's voice dripped with false concern. Well, they certainly need money. It would make sense. I exploded. Are you accusing us of stealing? Are you seriously standing there and calling my grandfather a thief? Call the police right now. I have nothing to hide. Do it. But Patricia waved a hand dismissively. And drag your poor father through that scandal? Have the neighbors see police cars? How generous of you. The trap was perfect. If I insisted on police, it'd be causing a scene. If I stayed quiet, the accusation would stand. I looked at my father one more time. Dad, you know us. You know we wouldn't steal. Tell them. His face was pale, conflicted, but he said nothing. Just stood there like a coward while his wife and her horrible children accused his own father of being a criminal. That's when something inside me snapped. I'd spent months caring for Grandpa alone, working myself to exhaustion, sacrificing everything, and this was what we got in return? I looked Patricia dead in the eye and let loose everything I'd been holding back. You're a cruel, heartless, manipulative woman who married my father for money, and everyone here knows it. You're turning him into someone I don't recognize. You're poisoning this family. Patricia gasped like I'd slapped her. How dare you speak to me that way in my own home? Stephanie jumped in. You're just jealous because you're poor and pathetic and we're not. I whirled on my father, shaking with rage and hurt. Are you going to let them treat us like this? Are you seriously going to stand there and let them accuse Grandpa of being a thief? Hes your father, hes sick. He needs you. My father's face twisted with something that might have been shame, but his voice was weak, broken. Maybe you should just calm down. Let's all take a breath. Calm down? They just accused Grandpa of stealing. They broke his heart and you're telling me to calm down? Grandpa was breathing hard now, his face flushed, one hand pressed to his chest. I could see he was getting overwhelmed, his heart rate spiking, and fear shot through me. We need to leave, now, but Brandon blocked the path to the door. Look, he's probably faking for sympathy. Old people do that. That's when Patricia delivered her ultimatum. The one I think she'd been planning all along. She turned to my father with tears in her eyes, a performance worthy of an award. I can't live like this anymore. I won't be disrespected in my own home. It's them or me, darling. Choose. The room went silent. Everything stopped. My father looked at me, looked at Grandpa crying and clutching his chest, looked at his wife with her manufactured tears. The pause felt like hours. Then, quietly, almost a whisper, I think you both should leave. I couldn't breathe. What? His voice got louder, like he was trying to convince himself. You heard me. Get out of my house. Dad, it's Christmas Eve. It's 20 degrees outside. Grandpa is sick. You can't do this. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. You should have thought about that before you caused a scene. Before I disrespected my wife. Get out. Patricia smiled, triumphant. Some people have no class whatsoever. I grabbed Grandpa's arm, grabbed our coats, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Stephanie called after us as we stumbled toward the door. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Brandon threw our wrapped gifts into the snow after us, laughing. The door slammed with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. The cold hit like a physical blow, wind cutting through our coats, snow already accumulating on the driveway. 20 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe colder with the wind chill, and darkness falling fast. Christmas lights twinkled mockingly on neighboring mansions, warm glows from windows showing families gathered together, everything we'd just lost. Grandpa was shaking so hard I thought he might collapse, his breath coming in short gasps, confusion and fear written all over his face. Why is my son angry with me? What did I do wrong? His voice broke my heart into smaller pieces than I thought possible. You didn't do anything wrong, Grandpa. I promise. This isn't your fault. I guided him toward my car, praying it would start, praying we'd make it somewhere safe before hypothermia set in. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. Grandpa slumped in the passenger seat, and I cranked the heat as high as it would go, though the old car took forever to warm up. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to think clearly through the panic. Where could we go? My apartment had no heat because the furnace had died 3 days ago and my landlord kept promising to fix it but hadn't. I had $47 in my bank account. Every hotel in town would be booked for Christmas. Friends? I didn't have anyone close enough to impose on like this. Family? It'd just been thrown out by the only family I had. The reality crashed over me in waves. We were homeless on Christmas Eve. Grandpa was sick and freezing. I had no money, no options, no backup plan. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let out a sob I'd been holding back since dinner, then another. Then I was hitting the wheel with my fists. Rage and grief pouring out in a way I couldn't control. Grandpa's voice, small and heartbroken. "I'm sorry I'm such a burden to you." I looked at him through my tears. This sweet man who'd helped raise me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and make pancakes and be kind even when the world wasn't kind back. "You're not a burden, Grandpa. You're the only family I have who actually loves me." And that was when headlights appeared behind us, bright and blinding in the rearview mirror. A black Mercedes pulled up slowly, expensive and out of place. And my first thought was that Patricia had sent someone to humiliate us further. The driver's door opened and an older man emerged, elegant in a long wool coat, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and a kind face. He approached my window carefully, non-threateningly, and I rolled it down a crack. "Yes?" His voice was gentle, educated. "Miss Harper Mitchell?" My heart stopped. "How do you know my name? I represent your grandfather's interests." "My name is Maxwell Sterling, attorney at law. I've been looking for you for quite some time. Is there somewhere warm we might speak?" I stared at him, suspicious and exhausted. "I don't understand. What interests? Who are you really?" He handed a business card through the window gap. "Maxwell Sterling, Esquire," with a law firm name I vaguely recognized as prestigious. "Please. Your grandfather needs warmth. Allow me to help, and I'll explain everything." I glanced at Grandpa, whose lips were turning blue despite the heater running. I didn't trust this stranger, but I trusted the cold even less. "Fine. But somewhere public." Maxwell smiled sadly, like he understood my caution. "Of course. There's a hotel 3 blocks away. I've already reserved a suite. Please, follow me." He returned to his Mercedes, and I sat there for a moment, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. But Grandpa whispered, "I'm so cold, sweetheart," and the decision was made. The hotel was beautiful, the kind of place I'd never be able to afford, with a lobby full of Christmas decorations and a fireplace and people in expensive clothes sipping wine. Maxwell checked us in without fanfare, paid for everything with a black credit card, and led us to a suite on the top floor. It had 2 bedrooms, a living area, a view of the city lights, and most importantly, heat. Glorious, immediate warmth. I got Grandpa settled on the couch, wrapped him in blankets, and Maxwell ordered room service. Soup, sandwiches, hot chocolate, comfort food that arrived faster than seemed possible. Grandpa ate slowly, color returning to his face, and I watched this stranger with narrowed eyes. "Okay, we're warm, we're safe. Now tell me what's going on. Who are you really? And how do you know us?" Maxwell sat across from me, hands folded, expressions serious. "How much do you know about your grandfather's past, Miss Mitchell?" I frowned. "He worked in factories, lived modestly, raised my dad after my grandmother died." "Why?" Maxwell pulled a folder from his briefcase. Old documents with yellowed edges. "Your grandfather wasn't just a factory worker, he was an inventor, a brilliant one." He spread the papers across the coffee table, patent documents from the 1960s and 70s, diagrams of some kind of industrial component I didn't understand, contracts with signatures and official stamps. "Your grandfather invented a specialized valve system used in manufacturing plants worldwide. He sold the patent in 1972 for what seemed like substantial money at the time, enough to buy a house and support his family comfortably. But the contract included a clause your grandfather likely didn't fully understand: ongoing royalties. A small percentage of every unit sold, in perpetuity. I stared at the papers, not comprehending. I don't understand. Has been living on Social Security. He has nothing. Maxwell's expression grew darker. Because he forgot about it, the dementia, the passage of time. The money accumulated in a trust account he never accessed. The statements were sent to his last known address, but after he moved in with you, they were forwarded to your father's house. Your father has power of attorney, has been receiving these statements for approximately 2 years. The room tilted. 2 years. Right when Dad remarried Patricia. Right when everything changed. How much money are we talking about? Maxwell met my eyes steadily. As of last month, the trust holds $48 million. Give or take a few $100,000 depending on market fluctuations. I stopped breathing. $48 million dollars. That's not possible. That can't be real. But Maxwell's face was dead serious. It's very real. And your father knows about it. Has known for 2 years. That's why he married Patricia. Why they live in that mansion. Why has been distant. They're waiting for your grandfather to die so they can inherit everything. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The sudden remarriage. The mansion. The cruelty. They wanted us gone. Wanted Grandpa isolated and forgotten so when he died, no one would question anything. I looked at Grandpa, peacefully eating soup, oblivious to the fact that his own son had been stealing from him, lying to him, waiting for him to die. Rage doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. Can we stop them? Maxwell's smile was sharp as a knife. That depends, Miss Mitchell. Are you willing to fight? Maxwell explained it methodically, like a general laying out battle plans. Your father has been accessing the trust. Small amounts, disguised as care expenses for your grandfather, but he's never spent a penny on actual care, because you've been providing everything. Over the past 2 years, he's stolen approximately $800,000. That mansion, Patricia's jewelry, the lifestyle, funded with your grandfather's money. Every word felt like a punch. My father stole from his own father, from a sick, vulnerable old man who needed help. How do we prove it? How do we stop him? Maxwell pulled out more documents. We'll need several things. First, a medical evaluation proving your grandfather's mental state and care needs. Second, documentation of the financial exploitation. Third, your testimony about being the primary caregiver while your father has been absent. Fourth, evidence that your father has been negligent in his legal duties as power of attorney. This will take time. Weeks, possibly months. Well, need to build an airtight case. That's when a woman entered the suite, sharp-eyed and professional, carrying a laptop. This is Diane Hartford, Maxwell said. Forensic accountant and the best in the business. Diane shook my hand firmly. I've been investigating your father's finances for the past month at Maxwell's request. What we've found is damning. She opened her laptop, showed me spreadsheets and bank statements, money trails that even I could follow. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every dollar your father took. Has been careful, but not careful enough. The total has stolen? More than we initially thought. I'd estimate $1.2 million once we trace everything. My voice came out as a whisper. 1.2 million, stolen from his own father, and he threw us out in the snow on Christmas. Diana's expression was ice. Men like your father think they're untouchable. Let's prove them wrong. I looked at Maxwell, then at Diane, then at my grandfather, sleeping peacefully on the couch, finally warm and safe. What do we do now? Where do we even start? Maxwell pulled out a checkbook. First, immediate needs. You need stable housing. Your grandfather needs medical care. I'm arranging a furnished apartment, paid for 6 months in advance. Medical evaluations start tomorrow. I'm hiring a home health aide to help during the day while you work, but I don't have money to pay you back. This will cost thousands. I can't accept this. Maxwell's voice was gentle but firm. Your grandfather hired my father as his attorney in 1972. Our firm has represented him for over 50 years, has been paying us a retainer from his trust fund this entire time. We work for him, Miss Mitchell. This is our job, and it's our honor." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. "Consider this an advance on your grandfather's funds for immediate expenses. Merry Christmas." I burst into tears, overwhelmed by kindness from a stranger, when my own family had shown only cruelty. Over the next hour, they explained the strategy. Let your father think he's won. Don't contact him. Don't respond to anything. Meanwhile, we'll quietly build our case. Document everything. Every pill your grandfather takes, every meal you prepare, every doctor's appointment. Prove you're the one providing care. Diane will trace every stolen dollar. When the case is solid, we'll file with the court to have your father's power of attorney revoked and you named as legal guardian. Then we'll pursue criminal charges for financial exploitation. It won't be easy. Your father will fight back. But the evidence is on our side. I looked at my grandfather, thinking about every sacrifice he'd made, every exhausting day, every moment of love and care, and hell lose everything? The mansion, the lifestyle, Patricia? Maxwell nodded. Justice doesn't always look pretty, but yes, hell lose everything. Good, I said. Let him feel what we felt standing in that snow. Let him understand what he threw away. 3 months passed like a blur. Maxwell and Diane weren't exaggerating when they said this would take time. But every day brought us closer to justice. Grandpa and I moved into a beautiful furnished apartment. Nothing ostentatious, but clean and warm and safe. For the first time in months, I could breathe without constant anxiety. Grandpa had proper medical care. A geriatric specialist who adjusted his medications, memory exercises that actually seemed to help, regular check-ins that gave him stability. His dementia hadn't disappeared, but with proper treatment and reduced stress, he had more good days than bad. He even started remembering me consistently, calling me by name instead of looking confused every morning. The home health aide, a wonderful woman named Rosa, came every weekday while I worked, so I could finally quit one of my jobs and just focus on the diner. My life wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. More importantly, it was mine. Meanwhile, Diane worked magic with financial records. She discovered the theft went even deeper than we'd thought. Dad hadn't just taken $1.2 million, had taken closer to $1.4 once she traced everything. Money for the mansion down payment, money for Patricia's car, money for Brandon's law school loans that Dad bragged about paying off, money for Stephanie's engagement ring. Every luxury, every boast, every moment of superiority had been bought with stolen funds. Diane compiled it all into a report that read like a crime novel, complete with dates, amounts, and evidence that would hold up in any court. Maxwell filed the first legal documents quietly, requesting a competency hearing and audit of Grandpa's trust. The court scheduled everything for 6 months out, standard procedure, which gave us time to prepare but also time for Dad to panic. And panic he did. It started with phone calls that I ignored, letting them go to voicemail. Tentative at first. "Harper, we should talk about Dad's care situation. Give me a call." Then more urgent. "Harper, this is important. We need to discuss your grandfather's living arrangements." Then desperate. "Harper, pick up the phone. This is serious." I never responded, following Maxwell's advice to maintain complete silence. Then Dad showed up at my old apartment, the one with the broken furnace that I'd abandoned 3 months earlier. He knocked for 20 minutes, according to my former neighbor who texted me about it. He looked frantic, she wrote. Kept saying he needed to see his father. Good, I thought. Let him feel powerless. Let him wonder what's happening. That's when Patricia made her move, and it was exactly as ugly as I'd expected. She hired a private investigator, some sleazy guy who tracked us down to the new apartment. The PI must've reported back that we were living somewhere nice, that Grandpa had medical care, that something had fundamentally changed. I could imagine the conversation at the mansion, Patricia's voice shrill with panic. How are they affording this? Did someone tell them about the money? They launched a counterattack. Dad's attorney, a man who looked like Head, sold his soul years ago and gotten a discount, sent a letter claiming Id kidnapped Grandpa. Kidnapped. Like he was a hostage instead of a sick old man had been caring for while his son stole from him. The letter threatened legal action, accused me of elder abuse, demanded Grandpa's immediate return to his father's custody. My hands shook when I read it. Maxwell just smiled. Perfect. Let them come. We're ready. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early April, right as spring started pushing through winter's grip. I was terrified walking into that courthouse, convinced somehow they'd win, that money and lawyers would defeat truth. The courtroom was all wood paneling and serious faces. A judge who looked like Shed heard every lie in the book. Dad sat with his expensive legal team, 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than my car. Patricia was in the audience wearing black like she was at a funeral. Stephanie beside her filming everything on her phone until the bailiff told her to put it away. Brandon sat separately, and I noticed he wouldn't look at his mother. Dad's lawyer painted me as a manipulative villain who'd isolated a vulnerable old man from his loving family, who was probably after the money herself. He had charts, timelines, arguments that sounded convincing if you didn't know the truth. Then it was our turn. Maxwell stood calmly and requested the judge speak with Grandpa privately, which was his right under the law. They took Grandpa into the judge's chambers for 20 minutes. I sat there sweating, praying He'd have a clear moment, that his memory would hold just long enough to tell the truth. When they returned, the judge's face was stern. She announced her ruling. Grandfather would remain with me, pending a full investigation into allegations of financial exploitation. Dad's lawyer objected loudly, but the judge shut him down. Mr. Mitchell, your father just told me in extensive detail how you threw him out in the snow on Christmas Eve. He described his granddaughter caring for him while you were nowhere to be found. Unless you can provide evidence to the contrary, he stays where he is. Dad's face went white. Patricia stood up, shrieking about injustice until the bailiff threatened to remove her. It was the first victory, and it tasted sweet. Outside the courthouse, Patricia cornered me while Maxwell was talking to another attorney. You think you've won? Her face was twisted with rage. Well, destroy you. Well, take everything. You're nothing. I looked at her calmly, thinking about everything Maxwell and Diane had prepared, all the evidence we had. You already tried to destroy me. You threw me out in the snow, remember? Patricia, you messed with the wrong person. I walked away, leaving her sputtering. But the biggest surprise came that evening. My phone rang from an unknown number, and against my better judgment, I answered. It was Brandon. I need to meet with you. Alone. It's important. I almost hung up, but something in his voice made me pause. Maxwell had warned me to be careful, but curiosity won. I agreed to meet at a coffee shop, public and safe. What Brandon told me there would change everything. Brandon looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat across from me in that coffee shop, expensive suit rumpled, tie loose, and wouldn't meet my eyes at first. I came prepared for a trap, Maxwell's number on speed dial. But what Brandon said in the first 30 seconds knocked me sideways. I'm sorry. For everything. For how we treated you. For what my mother did. For being complicit in all of it. I stared at him. You're sorry. That's why you wanted to meet? To apologize? He shook his head. I wanted to help. I've been disgusted with my mother and your father for months now. I didn't know about the money at first. I swear. I thought they were just wealthy. That your father had investments or something. But I heard them talking about 6 weeks ago, late at night, and everything became clear. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and showed me files. Audio recordings. Dozens of them. I've been recording their conversations ever since I figured out what they were doing. Patricia's voice came through tinny but clear. Once the old man dies, everything comes to us. The mansion, the cars, everything we've built, it's all secured. My father's voice responding, we just have to keep Harper away from him. Make sure nobody asks questions. Brandon played another recording. This one more damning. Patricia discussing forging medical documents to have Grandpa declared incompetent. Another discussing bribing a doctor to write that Grandpa was being neglected under my care. Another where they laughed about throwing us out on Christmas, about how pathetic we looked standing in the snow. My stomach turned. Why are you doing this? Why betray your own mother? Brandon finally looked at me. Because what she did was evil. I didn't sign up to be part of elder abuse and theft. I'm a lawyer, Harper. I took an oath. And beyond that, I'm a human being, and what I watched happen on Christmas Eve made me sick. You took care of your grandfather with nothing, while my mother wore jewelry bought with stolen money. He pushed the phone across the table. Take these. All of them. Use them however you need. I can testify if it helps. I'm done protecting people who do horrible things. I picked up the phone like it might explode. This is everything we need. You know that, right? This proves conspiracy. This proves theft. This could send them to prison. Brandon nodded. Good. Maybe my mother needs to learn that actions have consequences. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you're a better person than any of us. Your grandfather is lucky to have you. Then he walked out, leaving me sitting there with evidence that would destroy his family. Maxwell nearly cried when I played him the recordings. This is it. This is everything we needed and more. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, financial exploitation, all on tape. Diane got to work immediately, matching the audio to financial transactions, building a timeline that was ironclad. The full trial was scheduled for June, and we spent the next 2 months preparing. Every recording transcribed, every dollar traced, every witness interviewed. Maxwell brought in a geriatric specialist who evaluated Grandpa and wrote a report confirming his dementia, but also his clear memories of being mistreated. I wrote a statement detailing every moment of care I'd provided, every medication I'd managed, every time Dad had been absent. We built a case so thorough that even the best lawyers couldn't tear it down. The only question left was whether the jury would care. Would they see an old man victimized by his own son? Or would they see a family squabble over money? Everything hinged on that. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Local news had picked up the story. Something about the human interest angle. Elderly inventor stolen from by his own son. Dad sat at the defendant's table looking smaller somehow, his expensive lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. Patricia sat right behind him, Stephanie beside her, both dressed like they were attending a society luncheon. On our side, me, Grandpa in his best suit, Maxwell, Diane, and surprisingly, Brandon, who'd moved out of the mansion and cut contact with his mother. The judge was the same woman from the preliminary hearing, and she looked at my father like he was something stuck to her shoe. Diane went first, laying out the financial evidence with charts and spreadsheets projected on screens. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every stolen dollar displayed for the jury. She traced money from Grandpa's trust to Dad's accounts, from Dad's accounts to the mansion purchase, to Patricia's car, to luxury items that filled their home. The numbers were devastating. $1.4 million over 26 months. Dad's lawyer tried to claim it was all legitimate expenses for Grandpa's care, but Diane had prepared for that. She showed receipts, or rather the lack of them. No medical bills paid, no care facilities, no equipment, nothing that actually benefited Grandpa. Instead, designer handbags, jewelry, a fountain for the driveway. Then Maxwell played the recordings, Brandon's secret weapon. The courtroom went silent as Patricia's voice filled the space, laughing about throwing us out on Christmas, planning to forge documents, discussing bribing doctors. With each recording, Dad slumped further in his chair. His lawyers kept objecting, kept trying to get the evidence thrown out. But the judge allowed it. Relevant, she said coldly. Very relevant. Patricia stood up at one point, screaming, "That's out of context. He edited those." But Brandon stood up too, calm and firm. "Those recordings are unedited, Your Honor. I'll testify under oath to that fact." Patricia's face went purple, and she had to be physically restrained by Stephanie. The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom, and she went screeching about injustice and conspiracies. It would been funny if it weren't so tragic. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand shaking, put my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Maxwell asked me gentle questions at first, establishing my relationship with Grandpa, my role as caregiver. Then he asked about Christmas Eve. "I want you to tell the jury, in your own words, what happened that night." I took a breath and told them everything. The dinner from hell. The accusations. The figurine breaking. Being called thieves. Grandpa crying. And finally standing in the snow while my father slammed the door on us. It was 20 degrees, I said quietly. Grandpa was shaking so hard I thought he'd collapse. I had $47 and nowhere to go. My father chose his wife's cruelty over his own father's life. I didn't mean to cry, but the tears came anyway, real and raw. The jury watched me with sympathy, a few wiping their own eyes. Dad's lawyer tried to paint me as dramatic during cross-examination, but everything I'd said was backed by evidence and witnesses. Finally, Grandpa took the stand. Maxwell kept it brief because long testimonies were hard for him. Mr. Mitchell, do you remember Christmas Eve? Grandpa nodded slowly. I remember. My son threw us out. I remember standing in the snow, and I remember being afraid. Do you know why he threw you out? Grandpa looked directly at my father and his voice was steady, because his wife wanted my money, and he chose her over me. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. The judge asked if Grandpa wanted to say anything else. He stood shakily, holding the witness box railing. I loved my son his whole life. I worked hard to give him a good childhood. I was proud of the man he became, but am ashamed of what he turned into. He stole from me. He abandoned me. He hurt the one person who truly cared for me. I don't know him anymore. Dad broke down, sobbing, his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Too late, I thought. Years too late. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, every verdict was in our favor. Dad's power of attorney revoked. Legal guardianship transferred to me. Financial restitution, all stolen funds, plus interest to be returned. Criminal charges, recommended for prosecution. Grandpa's estate, secured under my protection. Any future inheritance upon his death goes to me as named in his new will. Dad receives nothing. The judge added her own ruling. Mr. Mitchell, I've seen a lot of terrible things in this courtroom, but what you did ranks among the worst. You betrayed your father in his most vulnerable time. You stole from him, lied about him, and threw him out in the freezing cold. You're fortunate we live in civilized times, or you'd face far worse than financial penalties. Patricia fainted dramatically in the back row, but nobody moved to help her. Stephanie tried to storm out, but security stopped her. Outside the courthouse, news cameras surrounded us. Dad tried to push through the crowd toward me. Harper, please, can we just talk? I need to explain. Maxwell and Diane formed a barrier. I looked at my father. This man I'd once loved and respected, now broken and pathetic. You had every chance to explain. You chose. Now live with it. I walked away with Grandpa's hand in mine and didn't look back. 6 months later, Christmas Eve came around again, and the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Grandpa and I lived in a lovely house now, nothing flashy but warm and filled with light. Wed used a small portion of his restored trust to buy it outright. A 3-bedroom place with a yard where Grandpa liked to sit and watch birds. The rest of the money stayed invested, secure, managed by Maxwell and Diane with strict oversight. We didn't need millions to be happy. We just needed enough to live comfortably and focus on what mattered. Grandpa's health had stabilized remarkably. The proper medications, reduced stress, regular medical care, and consistent love had given him more good days than bad. He still had dementia, still forgot things, but he knew who I was, knew he was safe, and that was everything. Christmas Eve dinner that year included real family, the kind you choose rather than inherit. Maxwell arrived first, bringing wine and stories about cases he'd won. He'd become like a grandfather to me, filling a role with wisdom and kindness. Diane came with her wife Sophia, an artist who made Grandpa laugh with silly jokes. Brandon showed up with his new girlfriend Rachel, a public defender who actually fought for people instead of protecting the wealthy. Even Rosa, the home health aide, joined us with her husband and their teenage daughter. We crowded around a table that wasn't made of marble, ate food I'd cooked myself instead of ordering from a private chef, and laughed until our sides hurt. This was what family felt like. Not performance, not transaction, not cruelty disguised as sophistication. Just people who genuinely cared about each other, sharing a meal and making memories. The conversation eventually turned to Dad, because it always did. Maxwell had told me about the divorce, Patricia leaving him the moment the money disappeared. Shed filed papers within a week of the verdict, claiming Head deceived her about his finances. The mansion had been sold to pay restitution, though it didn't cover everything. Dad was living in a small apartment now, working as a mid-level manager again at an insurance company that hired him back out of pity. Head lost his reputation, his status, his family. Stephanie wouldn't speak to him, furious that the money Shed counted on vanishing. Patricia had moved to another state with some new wealthy boyfriend. Brandon was the only one who occasionally checked on Dad, though even that was strained. A letter had arrived last week, Dad's handwriting on the envelope. I'd read it alone in my room, door closed, bracing myself. It was an apology, 6 pages long and dense with regret. He explained how Patricia had manipulated him, how Head gotten seduced by wealth, how Head convinced himself that taking the money was justified because Head inherited it eventually anyway. He described the moment the door slammed on Christmas Eve, how Head stood on the other side crying, how Head wanted to open it but Patricia had threatened to leave him. He wrote about watching the trial, hearing my testimony, realizing what Head destroyed. He begged for a chance to make amends, to prove he could change, to be the father I deserved. The letter was eloquent and heartbreaking, and probably sincere. I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer, not ready to respond but not willing to throw it away either. Grandpa had asked if I'd forgive Dad. Maybe someday, I told him honestly. But not today. He needs to understand what he lost. He needs to live with consequences. Grandpa had nodded, squeezed my hand, and said nothing more. The door to reconciliation wasn't locked forever, just closed for now. After dinner, Grandpa pulled me aside into the living room, away from the laughter in the kitchen. He had that look of clarity, the one that meant his mind was sharp and present. These moments were precious, and I always paid attention. Harper, sweetheart, I want you to know something. I know I won't always remember things. I know there will be days when I don't even know your name. But right now, in this moment, I remember everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I opened it to find the vintage pocket watch, the one his father had given him, the one Dad had rejected on that terrible Christmas. This is our family's legacy. Not the money, not the patents, not any of that. This watch represents time spent together, memories made, love passed down through generations. You're the only person who deserves it. I couldn't speak through the tears. Grandpa wrapped his arms around me, fragile but strong in the ways that mattered. You're the best thing I ever helped create. You saved my life, but more than that, you showed me what family really means. Thank you for being my granddaughter. Sitting there later, watching everyone laugh and talk, I reflected on everything that had happened. The past year had taught me lessons I'd carry forever. Money doesn't create family. Love does. My father had wealth, a mansion, status, and he lost everything because he valued things over people. It had nothing but a broken-down car and $47, and I'd gained everything because I chose love over comfort. Standing in that snow on Christmas Eve, I'd felt utterly abandoned, like the world had rejected me. Now I understood, you can't lose people who were never really there. Real family shows up even when it's hard. Real family doesn't slam doors, it opens them. Dad had chosen greed, and it poisoned him. I'd chosen compassion, and it saved me. The cruelty I'd experienced hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me into someone stronger, someone who knew the difference between what glitters and what's actually gold. The doorbell rang, surprising everyone because we weren't expecting anyone else. I opened it to find Stephanie standing on the porch, 8 months pregnant and alone. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by normal maternity wear. She wasn't wearing makeup. She'd been crying. Harper, I don't have any right to ask, but I need help. Patricia disowned me when she found out I was pregnant by a guy she didn't approve of. Dad doesn't have money to help me anymore. I have nowhere to go. I know I was horrible to you. I don't deserve kindness. But I'm desperate. She stood there shaking, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen her. I thought about that night in the snow, how it felt to be rejected, how terrifying it was to have no options. I looked back at Grandpa, who'd come to see who was at the door. He nodded slowly, giving me permission to make my own choice. I sighed, stepped aside, opened the door wider. Come in. It's Christmas. You're safe here tonight. Stephanie collapsed into tears, apologies pouring out between sobs. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I did and said. I was awful. You didn't deserve any of it. I held up a hand. Well, talk about all of that. But tonight, you're cold and you're scared and you need help. That's enough for now. Brandon stood up from the dinner table, saw his sister, and something passed between them. Forgiveness or understanding or maybe just acknowledgement that they'd both been shaped by a toxic mother and had to find their own way out. Grandpa smiled at me from across the room, and I realized this was the final lesson. The cycle of cruelty ends when someone chooses to break it. I could have slammed the door on Stephanie the way Dad had slammed it on me. I could have given her a taste of her own medicine, let her feel rejected and alone. Instead, I chose compassion. Not because she deserved it, but because that's who I wanted to be. The wealthiest person isn't who has the most, it's who needs the least. Grandpa had told me that once, and I finally understood. The evening ended with everyone gathered in the living room, talking and laughing. Even Stephanie, once shed, calmed down and eaten something. Snow started falling outside, gentle and peaceful, nothing like the harsh cold of that terrible Christmas Eve. I stood by the window watching it, Grandpa beside me, his hand in mine. He looked at me with clear eyes and squeezed my fingers. You did good, sweetheart. You made this family out of nothing. I squeezed back. We did it together, Grandpa. You taught me what love looks like. He smiled, and for a moment he looked young again, healthy and whole and present. Merry Christmas, Harper. Merry Christmas, Grandpa. The snow fell quietly outside, covering the world in white, and inside we were warm and safe and surrounded by people who'd chosen to show up, who'd chosen love over everything else. That's when I knew. Standing in that snow a year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But really, that was when I found what I'd been searching for all along. Not a fortune, not revenge, just the answer to one simple question. What is family supposed to feel like? This, right here, this is it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? Drop your story in the comments because I read every single one, and your experiences matter. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about resilience, justice, and finding family in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than their circumstances, that choosing love over bitterness is always the right path. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being part of this community. May your holidays be filled with the kind of warmth that comes from real connections, from people who show up when it matters, from love that doesn't keep score. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, or just have a beautiful day wherever you are. You deserve it.